Welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you've joined Matt and Joe as we restlessly seek the face of Christ in the midst of today's crazy and mixed up world. And so we're recording this over Christmas break, the day after Christmas, actually, the Feast of St. Stephen. And I don't know why we're working today, because today should be a day of rest. Why are you working?
This is all pleasure.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. No work's happening
This is
here.
a joy.
Oh, yeah. It's great joy.
It was funny. I had to explain to a bunch of people over Christmas why I would be working this week. They were like, "Don't you work for
Aren't you an essential essential
like
ministry?
a religious
here at the church?"
organization?" And I was like,
Well,
I
also did not get to take Christmas Day off.
No,
I had to work.
Yeah. My father is at work, so.
Oh, what's your dad do?
No.
Oh, your heavenly father. Sorry.
Hey.
No, my dad's retired.
My dad created the universe. But I understand.
Yeah.
Anyway, so every time Joe reads a good book, he wants to talk about it on Restless.
Yeah. It means I need to read more because it's not that often, actually. So.
Right.
But he read an excellent book, which I am ashamed to say I've never read, by a guy named Josef Pieper, who the book is called Leisure, the Basis of Culture.
Yes.
And it kind of makes the argument that as human beings, we were made for more than just labor, but we were made for labor and for leisure, and how the two of them interact and the two of them make us fully human. So what would you say if you can sum up that book in a
certainly this
paragraph?
won't capture everything, but I think so the basic point is this. I think Pieper sketches out an anthropological view of man centered around work. So the view of the modern world is that what man is he's a worker. He works for the production of useful things for society. Any time not spent working, therefore, is wasted, is idleness, because it's contrary to what he's here for, which is to work. And the problem with that is that it's wrong, because
things that are wrong are usually problematic.
Right.
Yes.
Because what we are made is in the image and likeness of God who loves us. And so what we are is not workers, right? We're human beings. And so what he's doing, what he does is he takes this idea of leisure, which to the worker anthropology, right, leisure is just idleness. It's just a waste of time. But he distinguishes between idleness and leisure. So idleness is actually a form of achadia. Am I saying that correctly? Achadia?
Achadia, yeah.
Which is like a restlessness that accomplishes nothing. That's a true time waste. And I have a great quotation about it.
Facebook,
and I have a great quotation about this, which I can read in a second. Contrasted to leisure, leisure is actually a form of rest. It's resting ultimately in the loving relationship you have with the Father.
Well, we use that same term, recreation, recreation, right? Is that resting?
Exactly right. But importantly, so a weekend is not leisure, because a weekend exists, or like a day off, for example, a PTO day off of work is not leisure because it exists for you to rest, to then work harder. So it's actually part of your work. Leisure is actually totally different. Leisure is not rest to then work harder or to then work more. It is rest to rest.
So it's an end in itself.
It's an end in
Not
itself.
a means
It's
to an
ultimately
end,
it's
right?
ultimately a waste. It ultimately is a waste of time. But it's choosing to waste time in a good way, as opposed to this frenetic activity that comes from the paranoia that I'm not accomplishing enough. So I have to find things to fix around my house. That's not rest. So you take a day off, so you rake your leaves, you do this, you do that. Well, you're not resting. You're frantically finding things to do.
Right.
That's a difference.
Well, I love what Henry Nouwen says about prayer. He defines prayer as wasting time with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it is true. I mean, an hour of prayer accomplishes nothing in external form. And to be honest, sometimes I come from prayer and wonder if it even changed anything in me.
Right.
That, did I just waste that hour? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's a highly inefficient activity.
Right.
You know, but also a completely essential activity.
Completely essential, right? And that's the paradox, right? Is that
Yeah.
leisure doesn't accomplish anything and is also the most important thing we do.
And it's actually a second major point of the book, very briefly, is that leisure finds its greatest expression in the festival, right? In the cultural celebration. But I just gave it away. The festival takes its root in the cult, in the worship. So actually, the height of leisure is worship, because only in worship are we perfectly resting in the loving embrace and loving work of our Creator. So in the Mass, which we'll talk about, we're not actually doing very much. It's not even a new action. It's a representation of an action that's been completed throughout time, and when we couldn't do it ourselves. What we're doing is we're resting in God in that, and we're allowing Him to love us in that.
And that's the beautiful thing about it's so beautiful, this archetype between male and female, right? Is that the church has always been seen as female, and the archetype is that the male is the giver and the female is the receiver, right? And so our souls, I mean, word soul in Latin, anima, and all this Romance languages is a feminine reality insofar as it receives all things, right, from God. And so it is, as someone who works is an active giver, is producing, is out there in the world. Somebody who worships is a receiver, those who receive everything from God. And that's the point of the liturgy, is that even though we have certain roles as a priest, as server, as a a lector,
as a
whatever,
mat.
as a mat,
Yeah.
that's a
People step all over me about this. It's terrible.
full-time job.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've gotten that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Welcome, Matt.
Yeah.
But
So I have a question for that though, right? So like, I don't know. It's often said in Catholic circles, like, well, I went to mass and if it's like I didn't get anything out of it, and then people say, well, it's not about you. It's like, wait, you're there to give worship, but how can you balance you're there to give worship and worship, which is the height of leisure, and leisure is about receiving?
that's a great question. I'm going to turn that over to Joe.
Okay. I have an argument to make about this. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the subject of my metaphysics paper this semester.
Oh, great.
Okay, so
Wow.
I
So you're getting the paper,
Yeah.
including
Yeah,
footnotes.
I reread it in the parking lot just to make sure. The last half of it. I argue as follows. I think that we misunderstand the Mass because we misunderstand leisure in two ways. So, to refresh, worker anthropology, I have to be working. Anytime not spent working is a waste, or it has to be ordered towards my work. Okay. So the Mass is then it's either a work that I need to accomplish, that I need to be involved in. I need to be doing something to achieve it, or it is from entertainment, from which I'm going to rest in, but rest, entertainment ordered towards my working on Monday. So I didn't get anything out of Mass. Okay. Well, did you not get anything out of Mass because you weren't doing anything in Mass, because you weren't working, because you weren't distributing communion, because you weren't doing a reading, because you weren't ushering people to and fro? Because if that's your attitude, I'm sorry to say, you're misunderstanding the point. The point is to rest in the Mass. Those liturgical ministers exist to allow you to rest in it. That's why there should be no more than necessary, right? So you don't need 20 people giving out communion to 60 people, right? Because you're supposed to be resting in the actual act of worship. Now, conversely, I didn't get anything out of Mass. Okay, by that do you mean the music wasn't good, preaching wasn't good? Okay. Now, those are good. They're good because anything less than good preaching, good music is unworthy of Almighty God. But they're not good because they need to entertain you, right? That's a Protestant view of this. Of like, well, I need to be receiving at all times, like actively my intellect. But it's not about what you rationally interrogate. It's about you being able to just passively take a deep breath and receive whatever graces, even if you can't feel them, that God's offering you, which He's concretely offering through the Mass.
Right. Well, that's the key, right? Is that the liturgy and the Mass is an act of God. It's not an act of the priest. It's not an act of the musicians, right? So we can receive what I give is not anything special at Mass in a homily, right? So whether my homily is good or bad, has the Holy Spirit been moving in your heart, right? We have to have that docility to sit back and to allow God to do His work in us in the Mass.
But it requires passivity. That's the thing that we can't get, is that we're so worked up about doing things, achieving things, activity.
I don't
Just
know
be
if
able to be
passivity is
passive.
the right. I don't know that that's the right word. I would use like
yielding,
openness.
yeah.
Or yielding,
Well,
openness.
it's a passivity. Sorry, it's passive. What I mean is it's passivity insofar as it's me accepting that it's not my activity that's going to accomplish this.
Right.
That I am ultimately a passive receiver in relation to the thing that's giving, which is God.
And the truth is, for priests especially, being in persona Christi, my role is to merely be a vessel, to merely be a conduit, right? That
So
I shouldn't be giving anything
Well, so I'm curious,
of
right?
my
like,
own.
Like, okay, fair enough. Take your word for it.
No, really. I mean,
But how do you receive at Mass as the celebrant? You know what I mean? Because I mean, like, it's easier for me to make the jump to, well, I'm going to choose to just receive. I mean, there are obviously some obstacles, like when my son runs out
Sure.
of the pew. You know what I mean? So like fair enough, But you are doing something. You're meaning like you're saying something.
yeah, but I fear that we think that receiving has to be a sensible reality.
Right. That's the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it never is.
Okay.
Well, not never is. I mean, but that's not the determining factor.
Right.
Whether I feel anything.
Right.
I mean, I would say probably 95 times out of 100, I feel nothing at Mass.
Right.
Oftentimes.
I'm glad that sentence was I feel nothing. Period.
Just no, it's
That's
just
just
Ben
terrible.
side.
I feel nothing at Mass. And it's
Yeah.
not, it's
yeah,
not,
yeah.
It's not because I don't love God. I love
No,
Him deeply,
right,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
just it's His.
I mean,
it's His
isn't that
grace.
some like somewhat related to the dark night of the senses, dark night of the soul, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's
that
just
it's not-
desolation, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
that's actually people don't understand that. That's actually the baseline of the Christian living is desolation. Like it's not like usually we're consoled and occasionally we go desolation. No, it's like usually we're in desolation and occasionally we have consolations. But I mean, same with marriage, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's kind of like the doldrums, the everyday ordinary, and then occasionally you have a really awesome vacation. You know?
Yeah,
Like-
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm gonna choose to not incriminate my own marriage here. But-
from my experience
yeah,
of counseling
yeah.
couples, right?
But okay. So here's a question I had coming into this, and you used the word entertainment in reference to
Negatively.
yes. So what's the difference between leisure and entertainment? Like, let's define those terms.
I don't-
Because I think that on the practical level of everyday life, if the height of leisure is prayer, worship, right? And like the height of entertainment is a real solid movie, you know? Like there's an obvious there's an obvious difference there.
Yeah.
And that's a character of entertainment probably, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what your father says. I guess what I would say is, and I think what Pieper would say is that they're not mutually exclusive. So if you go if you read a good book or you go to a play, you see a good movie, whatever it is, it can be entertaining. It can also be leisurely and recreative insofar as you're resting in it. You're receiving something from it. You're engaging with it. You're receiving something from it.
You're growing.
And it's not. This isn't for anything. I'm not reading this book for something. I'm reading this book just for because it's good, because it's enjoyable, because it's beautiful. That is different from just doom scrolling on TikTok or on Facebook for 2 hours, or from binge watching The Office, which I may be guilty of doing actively as we speak. So there's different because there's a dulling of the senses. You find, right? It's like I'm not really engaging with this. It's just like it's just entertaining enough and just short enough that I can just kind of keep flipping through it. But I'm not.
Well, I think
I'm not doing anything.
I think it's closely connected to the transcendentals, right? Is that if something is true and beautiful and good, then to be in its presence and to enjoy it is beautiful recreation. That's leisure. To be in the presence of something good, true and beautiful.
Yeah.
Versus something that's shallow and vapid and
Right.
like TikTok or whatever.
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned the transcendentals actually, because transcendental, right? Like what the transcendentals do is allow us to transcend our human state to some extent. And it's another point people make is that there's this distinction between the ratio and the intellectus. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that one of them is the human ability to rationally interrogate the world, and the other is actually the divine ability to just kind of contemplate and rest in it. And to be able to shift into that to the extent we can, transcending these things to actually contemplate the beautiful and the divine. That's leisure, right?
Have you ever been to Assisi?
Yeah.
Have you been to Assisi?
No.
Okay, so if you go to Assisi, there's a beautiful statue of St. Francis, which is very striking because it's all the way up like halfway up the mountain. It's really hard to find. But the statue features 3 of his early Franciscan brothers looking at the stars, and they have like some measuring things that they're like measuring the distance between the stars, and like they're writing down in a book, and they're kind of like looking with the telescope. And St. Francis is laying there, just with his hands behind his head, just
awesome.
adoring.
Right.
And so that's kind of the difference, is that one can know many facts about the universe, but to stand in awe and wonder at it and to receive the gift that it is. Because it really is, it comes down to, I think and John Paul II would talk about this, is the nature of gift, right? Life is a gift. The Mass is a gift. And it's about receiving a gift rather than analyzing a fact about reality.
Right. Receptivity. It's funny too, one way I could learn about Father Joseph would be to scientifically examine him, take his blood work, right? Perhaps even kill. Yeah, perhaps even
Kill me. No,
perhaps kill him and examine his body. I could learn all sorts of biological facts about him.
Just give me a psychological exam.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You learn a lot about me. I don't know.
Alternatively,
No, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't do that.
But alternatively, I can enter into a relationship with him and just be with him, and I will learn things about him from that relationship. And that's the resting in. That's the receptivity. It's like, if I'm offering myself to you as gift and friendship, I'm going to receive you, and I'm going to receive more than I would ever receive by rationally interrogating you.
Well, John Paul II said, "Man is a mystery unto himself." Right. So a list of, perhaps on something that's a non-personal being, such as a rock or Wolverine, you can have a list of facts and know it completely.
Interesting jump. Yeah.
Try to think of a random animal.
The two,
right?
the two objects.
Right, the 2 objects you might find interesting in life: rocks and Wolverines.
Yeah. I often do.
But a person because of their complexity, and they're being made in the image and likeness of a mysterious God, mysterious in the sense of not fully knowable, never fully knowable, right? Infinitely rich. For that reason, we can't know somebody fully. I can know everything about you. I can even spend my entire life spending time with you, even with your spouse, right? If you probably find in 50 years, there's new layers to discover. There's new riches. I mean, you've been married 2 years?
Yeah,
3 years?
a little over.
3 years, yeah.
Over 2 years.
And I bet you're still
that's for sure,
finding new things to love about Renee.
Yeah, and learning things that I didn't know before. That are kind of just general facts. So
you like
so,
pineapple on pizza? What's wrong with you?
You have brown eyes.
I never knew.
That's a problem.
So how about this? Okay, because the example you gave for in support of leisure was entering into relationship. Well, how does one balance that relationships take work, including relationship with the Lord, right? Meaning, like, I don't know, like in my experience, choosing to pray more than I want to, which I have to pray more than I want to. If I'm not praying more than I want to,
Right.
then I'm not
You
doing
wouldn't pray
it
at all,
right.
probably
Yeah,
half the
you know what I
time.
mean?
Yes.
That's fair.
Like that, there's a significant effort that needs to take place there, and I'm not suggesting that there's no cooperation with grace going on. I'm just calling it as it is, So how do you understand that balance of like effort and leisure?
What would you say to that?
I would say even in our leisure with one another, it takes great effort, right? A family making a feast, that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
To make all this food for Thanksgiving or whatever, but there's something that nourishes our spiritual being with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least personally, like I know in my ministry, I kind of categorize things into like life giving and life taking ministry. Like some ministry, I walk away from exhausted and exhilarated, being like, that was the best thing ever, and I'm so tired, right?
Right. Yeah.
Versus, I'm really tired and I'm drained. Like I just want to be by myself and find some way to recover, right? So I think like most people's 9-to-5 jobs are probably in the latter category. Of I'm doing it because I need a paycheck, and and even if you enjoy what you do, still at the end of the day, it's not really as life-giving. But relationships, I think, generally, if they're good and healthy relationships, are life-giving. So even though you're working at them, you're receiving life back as you're working, and it's becoming almost like an exhilaration.
So I mean, this is tangential.
No, the Tangent is a different show, and you're not allowed to talk about it here.
Sorry.
This is obliquely related.
Yeah. But you should listen to it. That seems like a good key for discernment, life-giving versus life-taking.
Yes and no, because in your vocation,
Stuff to do
in
things,
all of your vocations, there's a lot of life-taking things you have to do.
Right. So
right?
it's inevitable.
It is inevitable.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's things.
Everybody dies. No, sorry.
It's things that taking care of a 1.5-year-old that you'd probably be like, I really would rather not clean this dirty diaper right now, but I'm going to because I love it and I love this child.
Right. No, I don't love changing the diaper.
Not the diaper. This is the child.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think also I don't know how helpful this is, but sometimes you go into a holy hour, and it is work. Like you're not like I can't focus. I'm rereading the pages. I'm trying to like make connections, and that happens. And sometimes though, I at least for me, like I convince myself to actually like calm down for half a minute, and to actually just like rather than trying to figure out the reading, to just like listen maybe. And sometimes you actually do feel God moving in your life. And I think that like the parallel to the relationship is interesting, right? Because when you first meet somebody, there's like this awkward phase where it's like, where did you grow up? What kind of school did you go to? This happens all the time in seminary, by the way. You're thrown into all these guys, and you're like, how old are you? What did you do before you were here? Where did you grow up? All these questions, blah, 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 blah. And there's this actual like awkward work of trying to get to know them. But eventually, once those facts are established, once you do have that baseline, you're actually able to rest in that friendship. And you actually just learn things where it's like, oh, like this guy loves this thing. How do I know? Well, because I live with them, right? I see it. And there's this disclosure that happens. It's not intentional, right? I mean, sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's not. But that comes from the relationship, which requires work at the beginning. But I think the point is that, again, to go back to the ratio intellectus thing, there's the one is ordered to the other. So my rational ability to humanly interrogate things and learn about them is an important starting point, ordered towards this much more contemplative, much more divine way of knowing, which is based on these facts, but is born from my being able to passively receive from this relationship. So I don't know if it's helpful or not. That's kind of an abstract answer.
It is. I guess like it's super helpful, right? Like, because I've not heard that distinction before. I'm just trying to consider how one does it. You know what I mean? How one actually rests in a thing.
Here's a concrete thing from my own life. There's a difference between opening up night prayer at 10 p.m. being exhausted, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High and abides in the shade of the Almighty, blah, 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 and you rush through it and you stop. Versus he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High and abides in the shade of the Almighty says the Lord, my refuge, my stronghold, and my God whom I trust. And actually trying to like pause, go slow enough to actually try to maybe like not just rush through it, but to be present to what you're praying long enough to maybe receive from. Now, you can only put yourself in the posture to receive. You can't force reception because you can't force gift, right? So, but I do think there's an element of slowness and quietness that's necessary.
Yeah.
But I think it always, for me personally, I go back to the transcendentals because I'm very much type A, workaholic type person. And really the only time that I can just rest in God's presence is in the beauty of nature. And when I'm struck with a beautiful scene, I was out running in the icy snow a couple of days ago, and Lake Zor was covered in this ice that was cracking, and like it was really kind of a cool thing. And just like I was just able to stop and just sit there for 5 minutes, and that's a way in which we rest. And sometimes that's adoration of the beauty, or reading something that's true.
Right. Well, so for a parent, or that's where I jump because it's my life. But for any other person that's super busy,
It's what we're most qualified to help you with too. It's Father Joe and I, so that's helpful.
Right. Would you suggest that rather than say like, you know what, I'm gonna pray the rosary tonight, and it's 11 o'clock. I'm gonna pray the rosary. I'm exhausted. It's gonna take me about 20 minutes to get through the whole thing. Or the other option of I'm gonna slowly say 1 decade and try and rest in it. And maybe I'll end up doing it for 10 minutes, but like I'm going to actively aim for that receptivity. You know what I mean? Would you suggest going with that latter option?
Pray as you can, not as you can't.
Right. So
right.
Yes? No.
No, pray as you can, not as you can't.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like if it's...
Not necessarily like...
I mean, sometimes it might
intentionally
mean...
stopping after 1 decade. You know what I mean?
We're not saying that there's two possible options and how to choose between them, because you could say a whole rosary, you could try to meditate more on 1 decade. So it's a question of like, what's my approach here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Because I mean, it seems to me, right, that like it's better to open yourself up further, even if you don't get as many words out.
Yeah, my spirituality is probably more Franciscan than Jesuit.
Okay.
And Jesuit is very ordered. Like you must do A, B, and then C in that order, right? And Franciscans are just kind of like, well, let the Spirit lead, right?
It's whatever, man.
It's whatever.
Yeah. It's all vibes, man.
Because if you're at 11 o'clock at night and you're like, I just want to go sit on my deck under the stars and just like ponder God's goodness. That's your prayer. Go do it. That's fine. You don't have to be like, didn't do my rosary today. I got to rush it through.
Well, but I think there's a beauty to that too. Like genuinely, I think there's a real freedom that comes with that.
With prescription, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't experience that. Like. I mean, certainly growing up, I had that idea of like, well, I got to do A, B, and C,
Right.
And the danger of that is that you end up doing the thing that Christ explicitly told you not to do, which is just ramble on, as if you have to wear God down.
Right.
And it's like, that's not it.
And I mean, it's a balance too, right? I mean, I'm not saying like, throw away your prayer time, but I'm saying be flexible with your prayer time.
Right, yeah. Yeah, certainly.
You got to find what works for you. And...
Yeah. I didn't think you were telling me to throw away my prayer time.
No, I remember him saying, "Don't pray the rosary." And he said it just now. So,
out of context.
Yeah. One thing that helped me, actually, one thing this book helped me and made me change about my life is how I view holy hours that like, whatever, like dry or don't go anywhere or whatever. Because sometimes, you sit in the shop for an hour and you're like, well, that was great. I just like stared at the wall for an hour and didn't hear anything. And I would get very frustrated about that. And it would oftentimes make me stop a holy hour because like, well, clearly nothing's happening here. I'm going to try again later. And this book helped me realize it's actually okay just to be there. And it doesn't have to produce anything. Like this is time meant to be spent with God, whom I love. So like not every conversation with my closest friends like yields results. You know what I mean? But it's time spent with somebody whom I love. So even if it's not the most, like, I go every year to my grandmother's house, all the cousins, 3 of us, to bake cookies with my grandmother. None of us want to do that. Okay.
You don't.
It's boring. But I do it because I'm there with this person whom I love. So it doesn't matter that I'm not getting anything out. So sometimes I just have to remind myself, okay, you know what? I was there. I was in God's presence for an hour.
Yeah.
It was only a waste. It's not a waste. It was choosing to waste his time with God, and that's
Absolutely.
Good.
And I think too, one of the things that I think leisure is so important for, and not just leisure with God, but also leisure with friends and just one's own personal leisure, is our world is very materialistic in the sense that it believes that the material world is all there is. And so leisure acknowledges the spiritual reality of a person, that I am not merely just, as you were mentioning, just a cog in the machine, just a producer of widgets and whatever. And like that I have a spiritual nature that needs to be tended to, and that I'm made for more than this,
I
world.
have a dignity.
Yeah, I have a dignity. Now, at the same time, I don't know if you ever read John Paul II's Laborum's Exercens.
No.
Definitely recommend it. It's his encyclical about work.
Okay.
And it talks about the dignity of work, which I don't think is in competition or opposition with Pieper's book. I think are very complementary because it's significant to me that God's first commandment to Adam was go work, right? Go till the ground, keep the garden, make sure that it's, safe and tidy and nice and neat. And So in a sense, man was made to work, but that work was done in relation to God. And that work was 6 days, and we were made for the seventh.
Yeah, it's ordered to
Right.
it's ordered to ultimately rest in him. Like God rests from his labor. Even the story of the Exodus. I mean, what's Moses' first instruction to Pharaoh? Not release my people from slavery. Let them go worship for a few days and come back. You know what I mean? So like and then we see this again and again. The work is important. God works, right?
Yeah.
But he also rests.
Yeah,
I mean, he
he
tells us
does.
that. And so
Exactly.
there has to be like this complementarity, and it can't be that one can't cannibalizes the other. And I think that if we take leisure as like a proper understanding of it, we're at very little risk in this culture of having leisure dominate our work.
Mm.
You know what I mean? No, idleness might dominate our work, but that's a different thing. But I do think there's a need to properly order and balance work.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Rome for a year, and I'll tell you, I mean, it used to drive me crazy when people would take a siesta for 3 hours in the afternoon. Drove me nuts. 12:30 to 3:30. What? I can't go shopping? What is?
Right.
No, but I think they had it right, that they work to live, not live to work. There's something bigger out there
Mhm.
than making money. And that's why it always drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, because of the flu, we've lost $13 billion in productivity this year." That's not what we
Right.
are.
Like,
I'm not just
yeah.
productivity to you. Yeah. That's interesting. It strikes me too that Jesus commands his disciples after they've labored to come apart and rest a while. So do you guys I know you have to take retreats. Do you ever take retreats?
So the short answer is no. The longer
The long
answer
answer
is
is no,
but.
no.
Yeah, the long answer is no, but.
Yeah, the long answer is no, but I want to. And I mean, it's interesting, right? So like when we worked at Kung together, and at that time my son wasn't born the first year, and so like I had much more time at home to finish other things.
Mm.
I would often spend my free period in church,
Mm.
in the church downstairs, and since my son's been born, and I have stopped working at Kung, like I set time aside for prayer, but it's hard to find time to get away.
Mm.
So it's hard to find time to like find myself in an adoration chapel,
Yeah.
or in a church praying before the tabernacle. And so, this is like, again, for context, like I've been married for 2.5 years. My son is 18 months old. So it's not exactly like I've had years and years of practice with this,
Mhm.
maybe I should have had months and months, but, like figuring out that proper balance, that proper integration of work and the life work balance,
Yeah.
which is in a way like a leisure work balance.
Well, you have to say, if you're not able to get to an adoration chapel, what is, other than prayer, what is your recreation? What's your leisure?
Well, so the truth is that like I like to read scripture. I love to read scripture,
Mm.
and so when I take my prayer time, that's what I try and do.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is I love to learn. So like I know that for many, this is something. Do you know John? Yeah, you know John Eldridge. We did an
Oh, yeah.
episode on
Mhm.
Wild at Heart. He really emphasizes the call to adventure.
Mm.
And whenever I think about that, for whatever reason, what comes to mind is Father Elijah.
Great
and there's
book.
it is. It's a great book, but it's not for the reason that you would think, which is that in Father Elijah there is a line, or at least this idea that like you can have the full life of adventure within the monastery.
Mm.
And so like I've kind of reached this conclusion. I'm not like I will not cut off adventures when they present themselves,
Well, that's good, because
But,
in about 10 years, you and me and Michael are going backpacking,
That's tough. Yeah.
like it or not.
Yeah. Why does he have to be that
Joke.
old?
What? Why does that have to be that old? I mean, you can come with me now, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he's a year and a half. He can't backpack yet.
Yeah.
But...
No, he can't hold a backpack. He can fit in a backpack.
Right.
But there is adventure to be found in digging into scripture, right? Or learning truths, right? Experiencing beauty and goodness. And so it's kind of like I try and do those things in the ways that I'm interested in.
Well, what is it Chesterton says, right? An adventure is only an inconvenience rightly considered.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't open the Bible and go, "That's inconvenient." But
No, but even in our daily life, you got a flat tire. Like, oh, man,
Right.
come on. Wait, adventure.
right.
Let's
yeah.
see where God's going to move. Who
So
am
I go, wait, lots of money.
Then
How the heck am I going to afford this?
Yeah,
most
sorry.
adventures are rather costly.
Wait, tires are
I'll be
expensive.
honest.
So I guess like what I'm trying to say is that it's not all that adventurous to say like, well, how do you spend the free time you have? Like reading a book, you know?
Wow.
But right, yeah, you know,
Nerd.
like, yeah, I know, I get it. I took my glasses off before this episode, okay?
That's right.
So the people calling you a nerd, it would be an adventure for them to read a book. They've probably never done it before.
Oh,
So it actually
right,
would be a great adventure for them to do.
I read the book of nature.
yeah. You know, so it's like, I don't know. I guess it's for me. That's what it looks like, but it's malleable, which is kind of what you've been saying the
That's
whole
fair.
time. Which
That's
is
fair.
like
whatever feeds you, refreshes
yeah.
you, gives you back that.
That's another thing that I want to throw out there really fast, which is that attaching recreation to leisure, that's super beneficial for me to hear.
Yeah.
Because the word that I've been using is growth, but the thing is, growth is so often associated with work that I was like, how the heck am I gonna like put these things together? You know. So having recreation really is receptive.
Yes.
You don't create yourself. No one's ever created themselves.
Nope.
And so to be recreated is to receive.
Yes, true.
And so that's helpful.
That's a good point.
Jargon.
Well, we've reached the end of our episode. I hope it's been relaxing and entertaining and recreative to all of you who are listening. But I do want to urge you all to not be workaholics, because we're made for more than that. We have a spiritual nature which needs to be fed, of course, first and foremost through our relationship with God, even though sometimes that is an arduous task. But also find other things that nourish your spirit and your soul so that you can return with greater love to your family, friends, and to serving God and one another. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time to Restless.